guys, I really hope you guys enjoy this new interview series I'm doing. I'm going to try to put out an interview once a week with somebody who's very interesting, and even if they're a beginner. But in this case, Mike Swigunski is not a beginner. He's very accomplished, and it should be an extremely interesting interview. I wanted to say a few things about the person I'm interviewing prior to getting to the interview itself. It would really help Mike out if you were to check out his book. He has an audio book as well as a book that you can read on Amazon. You can check it out. It's going to be in the link. He has a link for all of his stuff that I'm going to put in the description. He's a best-selling author. He's written and contributed to Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, all these different places. He's really an accomplished traveler, an accomplished entrepreneur, a digital nomad of sorts. Lives outside of the country full time, and he's a very interesting guy who also helped me sell my business about a little over a year ago. Um, he's got amazing experiences and amazing information. I really hope you guys enjoy this video, and I really hope you support like my channel, but not only me, help support Mike's channel. He also has a YouTube channel, which will also be under the link. And it's much nicer than mine. So excuse my use of awesome and great in my very beginning interview skills, which are starting to get better. It's only my second interview, so hopefully as we go along, they will get much improved. So again, guys, please enjoy the video. Please like and subscribe. If there's anybody that wants to do an interview or that's related to any kind of e-commerce or entrepreneurial anything, I'd love to hear from you. And if you guys want me to ask any specific questions to certain people, or if you have people that you know that would want to be interviewed, please let me know at fbacommute@gmail.com. I'd appreciate that. And without further ado, guys, enjoy the video. Have a wonderful day. Stay blessed. All right. Okay, here we are with Mike Swigunski. This is Brian Maples, and this is an interview with Mike. Mike, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Brian. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Hey, thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And Mike, tell us where you are right now, and kind of a little bit about your background and what you're doing currently.
Yeah, so I'm a nomadic entrepreneur. I'm based currently in Tbilisi in the Republic of Georgia. It's a really small country located next to Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and to the north we have Russia. So I've been living here for 2 years, but for the past decade, I've been traveling all around the world, and I've been to nearly around 100 countries working and traveling just from my laptop.
That's awesome, Mike. And according to your book, you started traveling at a not necessarily a young age, but when you were around 18, right? And then you took a couple trips, did a couple things with student. If I understand, it's like a student organization or student trips, and then you kind of grew to love traveling from that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly. So I wasn't, jet setting it from a young age. I think the first time I was on a plane, I was like 17 years old, and that was like to fly out to California. So yeah, I slow stepped into it, and it wasn't just like an overnight thing where I just started living overseas. My first kind of like dose of getting the travel bug was going to Italy for a family vacation, and then the next year I decided that I loved it so much, so I convinced my parents to let me study abroad the following summer in Italy. And the way I was able to convince it or justify it was the same price for the courses. So the courses that I was taking there were going
Nice.
towards my finance and real estate degree. And yeah, it was just like a kind of a thing that they were excited about because, I would of course get the course credit, but learn a lot. I would be mixing with Italian students. Uh, Italian professors were also teaching some of the courses. So overall, it was just like it was an easy sell, and I absolutely loved it. Like spending time in Italy, I loved it so much that while I was there, the student managers of this study abroad program suggested that I apply to become a manager of the next year's program. And
Nice.
so as soon as I got back to the United States, I applied for this position. It's kind of like a 2-year position through the actual University of Missouri, where you're selling the course, you're essentially going out and like marketing the course, getting students signed up for it. Then you're teaching a course at the University of Missouri. And then in the summer, we were
Wow.
traveling overseas. So I actually got selected to be the Prague student manager, a city that I'd never been to. I didn't know too much about it, but I was excited to just take it But the one thing that they told me was they had 8 students the year before, and they're like, if we don't get 15 students, we have to shut the program down. And basically, me and the other student manager, we just like created a plan. And this was like my first experience with like marketing and sales and like doing all this like kind of organizational stuff for teaching a course as well through the university. So we like completely smashed the year before from 8 students. We maxed it out at 35 students that year,
Wow.
and it was a big success because it went from being potentially being shut down to being one of the more popular programs. And so I think that was like kind of an experience where I kind of had like my initial entrepreneurial thing where I was like actually had a lot of autonomy on this course of running all aspects of it, even though it was like under the umbrella of the university. So then I basically was doing this for 2 years and was kind of looking at two paths to go for when I was graduating. I was looking at interviewing at corporate jobs or just going off to Europe and like booking a one-way flight, taking a group of students there. And so that's the path I eventually chose, was to move to Europe, try to find a job working there. And my first job out of college was teaching financial economics to students who a lot of them were actually older than me. So it was a pretty interesting first job after graduating.
That's awesome. So, and you were, if I'm correct, you were able to pivot that advertising experience into other jobs later down the road, right?
Yeah, so it all kind of built upon. So after, the reason I was able to work at this university was because I had 2 years of teaching experience. They saw like the results of growing the program in the United States, and they kind of saw that I was the key person running the program who really grew it from 8 students to like 40 or 50.
That's awesome,
So they
man.
kind of saw firsthand, and over 2 years, I was building relationships with this university. Finance was my background, so it all made sense, and it all kind of came together. But I just after a year of teaching, I just realized that wasn't the career path that I wanted to go down. I'd have to go get a PhD, kind of be an academic, and it just wasn't for me. I really loved that experience living in Prague for 2 years. Working and teaching at the university was amazing, and it helped get me to the next point, which was moving out to Australia and basically working for tech startups in sales and marketing. And that's kind of how I got, this starter or this sort of light bulb moment where I could just move abroad, find a job, and kind of keep traveling, doing what I loved and was passionate about.
That's awesome, man. And so you had no experience. You started when you were flying when you were 17, and then you went from that to traveling full time and just really took the bull by the horns. I think it sounds like you got some confidence built up when you really did that class for a couple of years, and kind of pivoted that experience into a lot of other jobs. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, definitely. So it all kind of like once, was one step after the next. And basically what happened was I was doing a lot of solo traveling, and I think solo traveling is one of the most like confidence building things you can do because you're
Right.
going to a foreign country, you're by yourself, you really have to push yourself past your comfort zone. And once I was doing that, I kind of realized, if I can do this in a foreign country, I can do anything. So it really gave me this sort of different perspective on life and kind of what path I wanted to take. So ideally, I could build my own career while still traveling around the world. And eventually, I pivoted from just location dependent jobs to jobs where I could work remotely, and that was this first tech startup in Australia where I could work from home and work from a laptop. And once I had that, that was like the real moment that okay, this is what I want now. I don't want to be tied
Right.
to a location. I want to be able to work online.
And you talk about that in your book, how you transitioned right to basically a full time nomad. You said you'd stay before that you'd stay in a place for like 6 months and realized that you're still just kind of you're still just kind of traveling from that location versus traveling all around whenever you wanted. Is that accurate to say?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, with these jobs, when you move to, a place like Australia, you're still kind of tied to that location, even though
Right.
I was working remotely. I still had to be in Sydney. I still had to like, go to meetings and sometimes go to the office, but it was definitely a lot better. It was a lot more flexible than like jobs that I'd had in the past. So it was a definite improvement, but it just kind of gave me that insight like, hey, I'm not a coder, I'm not like a developer, but I was still able to work remotely. And so that kind of opened up this whole sort of mindset is like, yeah, there's a lot of these jobs out there where you can just work online and work remotely. And so that was kind of like the end
Right.
game. So after this job in Australia, I actually kind of took a side mission or a side quest, I guess, to go study my MBA in South Korea.
Wow,
And
that's
I had met
interesting.
a professor while I was teaching at the university in Prague. And eventually he's like, you should apply for this MBA program. You'd be a great fit. There's a lot of scholarship opportunities. And so I applied, got a full ride. They paid for my flights. They hooked me up with teaching jobs and like working for the university there. So that was like a 2.5 year experience of living and working in South Korea. And
Wow.
after I graduated, I was trying to find work there, but it was really difficult for non-teaching jobs in Korea. So then I decided to move to New Zealand, found a job at a tech company again, and they ran out of money, and I ran out of a job after like 4 months, but it was still a great experience. And that's the next job after that was this really small startup called Empire Flippers, which was we're going to be based in Southeast Asia, and basically I flew out to Vietnam and was going to help them start building this company. There was like 4 or 5 of us just working in this apartment building, building this
Wow,
company. Yeah,
that's how it started.
yeah. So we were basically just living in an apartment together, kind of 5 of us living there every day working. It was a really cool like environment. It was kind of like you see all these pictures of like
The series and
the
stuff
early
about
days
starting.
of Google or like
Yeah.
Apple where they're working out of a garage. It was a more luxury version of that. It was a really nice like a penthouse because like they were still making good money. They were just the deals they were doing were like I remember we were doing like $100,000 deals and we were like celebrating that. Like that was a huge deal for us at the time. And this was for context. This was back in 2016 when I joined, and basically we kind of um, grew the company to where it's at now. More than hundreds of people, and I ended up exiting the company back in 2020, about 2 years ago.
That's awesome, man. I had no idea. You said you were the fourth employee. I guess I should have figured, you had to have a startup period, and it really grew from there. But yeah, like I think there's a lot of TV shows that show startups and stuff. So kind of like sounds like that environment a little bit, but you said mixed in with a little bit of luxury.
Yeah,
um,
the
you
good
know,
thing was they were bootstrapped, but they'd been really lean. So they definitely like early on there was only 4 or 5 of us, so it was easy to kind of like okay attribute this like we're having we're able to still live a good lifestyle and still build this company and be profitable, and like profit first was kind of the mentality, whereas like a lot of these other like companies that get VC money, they end up I don't know like just blowing it all and running out of money after like 3 to 6 months.
we'll have to definitely talk about that and touch on that. A couple of things from what you said, I'm curious about, and from your book, it almost sounded like you thought at first that you either had to have like a programming background or you had to teach English maybe, and it sounded almost like it was limited, but it sounds like your perspective opened up quite a bit from that initial. Is that accurate to say that those are the kind of jobs you kind of pigeonholed yourself in at first, or did you
Yeah,
think it was
so
broader?
there was a time, I mean, now it's like things have changed a lot, but back in, 2015, 2016, it was kind of this like mentality where you had to be a coder to find an online job.
Right.
And even like when I was working remotely, like still like all my friends, all my family were like, "Oh, how are you able to do this? Like you're doing marketing online?" Like they didn't really get it, but they were all always super supportive and thought it was really interesting. But yeah, then eventually, like I started writing my book to kind of help teach people that hey, you don't need to be a coder to have an online job. There's uh, tons and tons of opportunities out there, and even like remote companies, we always struggled with hiring. Um, we were hiring remote employees because that was always one of the hard parts, and I think a lot of people just didn't know about these opportunities. And fast forward to the past couple of years now, a lot of people know that their job can be done remotely.
Yeah, COVID might have something to do with that,
Yes.
So let me ask you this: as far as remote jobs go, is there an advantage from seeing it from like the early perspective from Empire Flippers? Is there an advantage to hiring remote workers? Obviously, there's no overhead, but what would be the motive for somebody to want to hire a remote worker versus a worker that comes into the office? Is it the experience, or is it what would be
Yeah,
the
so I
motivation?
think it just, like let's say like Empire Flippers was based in like, I don't know, Delaware or something, they'd be limited to the people in that space. Maybe they don't have a lot of online experience. I had
I
built
see.
some websites before I joined Empire Flippers, so I did have some sort of like experience with WordPress. I built my own blog and stuff, built some affiliate sites. And basically, being able to hire remote expands their hiring pool greatly. And essentially, they wanted to train people in person for like 6 months. And a lot of people, if in the U.S., if you're based there, you have to have the office space. You have to essentially pay them a much higher salary because they're not going to be able to take advantage of geo arbitrage. So overall, it's a win-win because you're giving more flexibility to the employee. They're able to be really effective and impactful, but without having to pay them, the office space, the overhead. You're able to get a lot more talent because you can hire from anywhere in the world, and then you can let that person work from anywhere. So it's just a great balance for employee and employer when you're able to offer these like remote, flexible benefits.
That makes a ton of sense, really. Like you said, opening up the poll because there's so much talent all over the world. If you limit yourself just to the United States, it's going to be a big difference if you can go to the whole world. Let me. That brings up another point, and maybe you've experienced this when you're traveling. I'm curious about this. Has language been a barrier, obviously for hiring, but not only for traveling? I know a lot of people know English, and I know it's like the lingua franca of the
Right.
world. At least still is, I'm sure. But do you know other languages, and have you found it troublesome to travel with just
Yeah,
English?
so I've been very fortunate with English. I can get by, you can get by super far with English.
Right.
But whenever I'm like, of course, living in a city or a country for a little bit longer period of time, I try to learn like, I don't know, the basic 100 phrases, because if you know these like 100 phrases, you know a big portion of the language and you can get by. So for the second language I know the most is Spanish, which I was taking in high school. I knew when I was living in Colombia, I was taking lessons almost every day at one point. So that language helped a lot in South America because the English levels are pretty low there.
I see.
But yeah, anywhere it's really going to vary on the city and the country. But yeah, I would say like knowing a second language definitely helps in a lot of
Right.
scenarios. For
That's awesome.
Americans though, like Spanish is probably the most useful.
Yeah, especially with a lot of people, and of course in the United States know Spanish. That's interesting. So you're confident you can get by for the most part on English, and using some. It sometimes sounds like to be respectful to try to use your language if you can manage it. Um,
Yeah, I mean, even if I'm going to a place for a week, I still try to learn like thank you, like how are you, like good day, like all these kind of sayings that you would say to strangers. It's just a little bit respectful, I think, to try. And people
yeah,
are like, I've said like thank you to people in like their language and like in Asia or something, and they were just like so happy that I was like putting in the effort. Like
yeah.
it's really nice to see that.
The shame of that is it sounds like the United States doesn't have a great reputation with doing those things.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
say like we've got a pretty good reputation for the most part
that's good.
for traveling. I think everyone just has an opinion about our politics. Where if you ask somebody, oh, what's your like opinion on the politics of Bhutan? No, nobody's gonna like really have too much insight. But if you ask them for their opinion on America, almost every person in every country has some opinion about that. So that
Sure.
puts us in the spotlight. We're kind of like under the microscope, I think. But
Yeah.
overall, people around the world they really, of course, get along with Americans, but don't necessarily understand our politics or agree with our politics.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're such a huge influence in the world. That's understandable. We impact so many lives, not just the United States, but all over the place. So where you're currently located, you mentioned just to speak quickly of politics, you're just south of Russia. How much has the war impacted you? And did you want to talk about that? I mean, how close to home is that for you? Being a traveler, you're so close to a country that, of course, it's attacking a country next door.
Yeah,
I know you're a little further
definitely.
away from it, but yeah.
So the Republic of Georgia experienced a very similar situation back in 2008. So they're
Right.
one of the countries that's very empathetic with Ukraine because they've had Russian troops on their soil killing their people.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're very like it's kind of like PTSD for them, to be honest. It's very painful for them to see this same thing happening to Ukraine, of course on a much larger scale. Um, Essentially in Georgia there's a disputed territory where a lot of these countries bordering Russia seem to have. So yeah, they definitely have impacted. A lot of refugees have come here, which have changed the dynamic a lot. So as far as like the day to day life, though, everything's pretty normal. A lot of prices have gone up, but other than that, everything. Georgia's been very welcoming to other nations. They're one of the most welcoming countries in the world to other countries. Like they allow you to stay here for 1 year with just your passport, and that's not just for Americans, for like
Wow.
180 countries or something, where you
So
can just show up and stay for a year.
you didn't have to. I know you talked about in the book visas, and some can be challenging, some can not. So you don't have a visa there. You just set it on a passport, and you can work like that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mentioned Georgia in my book because of this. It's one of the only countries in the world that offers this. It's so unique, and they have a like a saying here that a guest is a gift from God, and they really are very welcoming to foreigners, and especially
That's
Americans.
awesome.
They really like us. We have a good reputation here and kind of good political relationship.
That's great. That's awesome. So yeah, you've been there for a while, right? It sounds like you've been there for quite a while.
Yeah. So I've been based here a little bit over 2 years.
Wow. Okay, so I thought that's very long. So you're pretty happy. There's plenty to still see there. It sounds like.
Yeah, I love it here. It's going to be my home base. I'm still traveling, probably 3 or 4 months out of the year, not all at one time, but every month I'm going on some trip because it's a really good travel hub. So just recently I was in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and it's cool to like be able to explore some of these like places a little bit more off the beaten path.
Yeah, I've heard of both of those, but obviously I've never been. I haven't been to many places, but it sounds very interesting. You've been to 100 countries, which is unbelievable. I can't imagine some of the things you've seen. It's probably pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun and it keeps life interesting. It's just I'm like in love with traveling, and I the thing I love about traveling is you're always getting able to experience something new and fresh, and that's the thing that I really crave, I guess.
That's awesome, man. I'd love to even just get to Europe. That's my goal. So eventually, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but so let's get in a little bit about you. So you're traveling. You were with Empire Flippers, um, and you talked a little bit about that. So you do a little bit of brokering, right? Because you helped me with to sell a business. And can you talk a little bit about that? And obviously you pivoted from Empire Flippers, so you know some people on that end. And we,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. So I eventually had left Empire Flippers after being there for 4 years because my side hustles had started taking off, and I just wanted to be my own sort of build my own empire. So that
yeah,
was the reason I ended up leaving, and I'm still very well connected because I kind of helped frontier this industry of buying and selling online businesses. So I still have like a role as an acquisition advisor, helping people kind of navigate the space because it's gotten a lot more complicated than it was, even a couple of years ago. So as an acquisition advisor, basically I'm helping entrepreneurs find the fastest way that they're going to get the most amount of money after any fees or anything like that. So I'm working with brokers, I'm working with private buyers, and I'm working with aggregators to essentially take your business, help you structure it in a way where it's going to be more appealing to all three of these people. And then we're essentially going around and figuring out, hey, you're going to get, let's say you're going to get $600,000 from this person after any fees, but if you go with this person, you're going to get 500K with all the fees included and stuff. It might take 3 months to sell it, but you're going to get 600K within 3 or 4 weeks. That's a great deal. You're going to get all the cash up front. So that's kind of like the value that I'm adding to this marketplace. And essentially, like the way my fee structure works is if you do end up going with a broker, I don't charge any sort of commission. And if you end up going with an aggregator or one of my buyers, then I charge 5%. So as far as like the fee structure, you're getting way more money because there's lower fees. You're going to hopefully sell your business in a faster time. And it just kind of has like having this third party person who knows the industry really well. I
right.
know what to look out for. I know what to kind of have included in contracts, what type of deal structures you should accept and should decline, or kind of, and then for negotiation, it just helps having this third person kind of pushing back a little bit more than I think some entrepreneurs would on their own.
I can attest to that because you did a great job when we sold my business, and I really appreciated your experience and your knowledge. I had no idea. There's so many things you don't know. Even now, if I had to do it again, I'd probably talk to you because, or more than likely, I would because I just don't know all the ins and outs. And just to navigate it on your own, especially the first time, is very difficult. So, um, let me ask you, what if you're gonna, let's say I'm out there and I have a business and I'm like, man, yeah, I want to sell my business. Maybe I should contact Mike, and I'll put your contact information in the link. Um, where do you want that business to even be to even consider selling it? Like, are you 1 year in? Are you 2 years in? Are you 3 years in? What kind of revenue would you even consider? Or do you consider anybody if they're making revenue? Like, what do you want to see history wise and some of the
Yeah, so
metrics?
I've kind of positioned myself around like the 500K valuation up to like 5 million,
Okay.
and anything in between. So that could be a business most likely generating, I don't know, around at least $10,000 a month in profit. That's kind of like my minimum threshold. So that's after any sort of fees or anything like that that you're incurring with your business. So that's like net profit. But yeah, anything that's around there is kind of what I'm considering, but I'm focusing on these kind of larger deals, mostly in the Amazon FBA space, but I'm working on all types of deals, drop shipping, software, anything like that. So yeah, it kind of, as far as like financial details, at least 1 year of data is going to be pretty much a non-negotiable for most buyers. So
Right.
I would say 6 to 12 months is kind of ideal, but 12 months is going to be the best. They just want to see that full kind of year to see if there's any seasonality behind it. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. Like, if you hold on to this business and you continue growing it, if you have at least 2 years of data, it'll probably get you a higher valuation than if you just had it for 6 months or something.
Which is kind of interesting because you'll probably make more. Obviously, if you held on to it for another year, you make that revenue, plus your actual value goes up, which is kind of odd to me. But it makes sense though. I mean,
Yeah,
um,
it's just essentially like you're reducing the risk for the buyer by having more data points and more financial history and
right.
probably a bigger moat around the business.
That makes sense. Totally makes sense. So you're looking for at least 1 to 2 years, around $500,000 valuation, so probably at least $10,000 a month. Um,
Yeah.
how? Let me ask you this. It seems to me that, and I might be wrong about this, but from what my data I've looked at, that sales seem to be down across the board, at least on Amazon, and that might just be a temporary flux. Might have something to do with the economy, inflation. Do you see the same thing, and how's the industry kind of changed just from about
Yeah.
a year ago?
So things have definitely changed as far as like I think the outlook for people in general, like not just like the day-to-day consumer, but like
Sure.
these big funds have kind of become a little bit more conservative. And I think that has kind of gone over to why sales have dropped. But also like our benchmark of last year is kind of like going to have an asterisk in it for the last 2 years
Because of
because
COVID.
COVID,
Yeah.
yeah, just like it blew up so many industries in a good way. And now they're like, okay, well, last year, it did this, but this year we're down, but we're still doing really good. So that's like kind of, I would say, part of it. The benchmark is like probably too high. So you probably should take like a couple years data to like find a more average benchmark that you should go off of, or just try to find some way to like uh, kind of set the expectations to reality because the COVID years definitely improved a lot of industries. But then with like things going on with Ukraine and Russia, there's a lot of disruptions between trade routes. A lot of things are getting more expensive. So there's
No
a lot of
doubt.
factors going into play, and I think a lot of that now is just kind of this FUD, this sort of FUD that like
Yeah.
people have on the market where fear, uncertainty, and doubt is FUD.
Right.
Basically, people are becoming more conservative with their money because who knows what's going to happen in the next couple months. Um, they're talking about a potential recession in the U.S. So
Right.
I think that stuff is kind of what's impacting it, but there's a lot of factors at play.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let me ask you: have valuations changed? Then have they gone down? Are they about the same? Um, and maybe now would be a good time to exit because maybe there is that fear. So do you think it's a good time? I mean, it's obviously any time a good time to exit if you get the right deal. But is it a good time you think for the market as a seller or a buyer, or is it kind of in between?
Yeah, so I think, if you're a little uncertain about the future, I would say now is a great time to sell because you're going to get that lump sum of capital
Right.
that you can kind of like have that safety net in case things do go down in the future. I would say probably the multiples will go down a little bit more in the future. That's just my guess,
Right.
but
Right.
historically though they've gone up every year. So we'll see what happens, but it won't be a huge impact. It could be like, a 28x multiple, maybe 27 or 26 in the near future, but we'll see what happens.
Still going to be a massive multiplier from where it used to be, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's just one of these things like the online buying and selling space is still kind of the tip of the iceberg. Like I
Yeah.
was reading today about, somebody getting a 10%, like Warren Buffett's 10% returns is being praised in the market. And for me, it's just like 10% returns is like, I bought an online business. I acquired it, I grew it, and got my ROI back in 9 months.
Wow.
The business has more than 10x, and I don't think you can do that with any sort of investment. Of course, like the online space is a little bit more risky, but I would say it's just as risky as any physical business. It has different risks.
So let me talk about that, and that's what I wanted to get into. So you were at Empire Flippers after you had done a number of different things, and you kind of get into the ad space, right? Especially online, and you have a lot of great experience with that. So you kind of you left Empire Flippers, but you still do brokering, which we just talked about, and then now you've moved into. You just talked about. We're not going to mention the name, but you talked about the company that you've 10 times it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, 10x did
Wow.
in under 2 years. So yeah, within 9 months, I got my initial investment back. So yeah, as far as like what I'm doing now, I kind of
Yeah.
have two branches. There's the global career, which is my best-selling book.
Yes.
Underneath that book, I have courses, I have consulting, and I have this brokering service, which I help buyers and sellers. So I would say 80% on the sell side, and then the other 20% is helping people who have around 150K and they want to buy a business. They just don't really understand the marketplace. They probably have some sort of online skill, but they just don't know how to find a deal that's going to match up to that. And so I help them with the deal, and then I help them outline a growth plan to buy and grow this business.
So
So that's kind of like the one side. The other side is I have a software business and a few other like passive income streams. So like my software business, it's like 1 or 2 hours a month of passive income of work required to
that's
kind of
amazing.
maintain it. So
So you,
I have
yeah.
a customer service rep kind of doing the blunt of work, but it's still even for her it's not that much.
That's awesome. So you've, as people talk about passive income, and nothing's truly passive, but that's pretty close to getting the passive when you're talking about digital products. Um,
Yeah. That's the reason I'm so attracted to digital products. We were kind of chatting about this earlier. It's like
right.
um, you can front load, for like 3 months, you can build a course or build a digital product. And then like for the software business, it's basically unlimited. Like my inventory is unlimited. It's never going to run out. It's just a bunch of code packaged together in kind of a zip file with a license key. And essentially that can scale to infinity and beyond essentially. And that's why I love kind of this course space, the digital product space. And the good thing is, if you figure it out right, you can add a ton of value. You can help a lot of people, and that's one of the things I want to help impact millions of people in a positive way. And the book is a great way to do this, but there's a time and place for a book, and there's a time and place for hey, if they really want to figure out how this is done, you kind of have to take a course, and you got to follow a step-by-step plan
Right.
from somebody who knows what they're doing.
Totally. So it's amazing. So you have the book. You're a best-selling author, right? You have the book, obviously, which is a great book. I definitely recommend you pick it up. I'll put the link in the description. You have a number of digital products, including a software business, and these all make you money while you sleep, right? And they're renewable. It's not inventory like many FBA sellers are doing. If you had recommendations for somebody that wanted to get into kind of what you do, digital products, and they didn't know where to start, what do you? Is there a good resource that you offer, or would you recommend a certain course?
Yeah, so I haven't really seen any courses of people that are getting into digital products like from scratch. So
Might
if
be a
you're
next idea,
interested in,
Mike.
yeah, it probably is a good idea, like how to build a digital product from scratch. I would say, yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm helping people kind of buy these businesses. So if you want to save 3 years of time, you could just buy one of these already successful businesses, and that's kind of like my mantra and kind of what I'm doing now is like you can spend a lot of time trying to launch something and it doesn't ever like amount to the success that you would if you just bought something from scratch. So I think that's like the fastest path to success is through acquisitions, and that's why a lot of companies and a lot of people are kind of getting into this space because hey, they can buy. I mean, there's literally $1 billion funds buying these types of businesses
Right.
because they can buy it, grow it, and get their investment back faster than any sort of thing, especially starting from scratch.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It's really interesting to hear that because as an entrepreneur myself, I really would like to hear about digital products because it's not something I'm very comfortable with. If I bought a business, do you know some good resources I could go to that might be able to help me grow the business? Is there do you use employees for that, or obviously you have a ton of experience with marketing and with empire flippers? So do you have certain people you go to every time, or do you kind of put in the work yourself and direct the people that you have under you?
Yeah, so as far as like when I'm helping somebody outline like an acquisition plan and then a growth strategy, I'm the
Sure.
one who's kind of coming up with that. And like, depending on the business model, they'll be like, okay, you can use this person. They're like a vetted, like PPC person that's going to help you scale with Facebook ads, kind of introducing them to the right people. But not every business model is going to fit into that. So I'm kind of molding. It's like, over the next 3 to 6 months, here's what you should help, and I'll be at your kind of beck and call to like help you through it.
Awesome.
So that's kind of like what I'm offering. I don't know if there's anything else out there that's kind of like you know a marketing agency for entrepreneurs who acquire a business. But it really just depends on like the type of business. I'm sure like there's a lot of marketing agencies that can offer a lot of products for your business, but they're not geared towards like this sort of acquisition strategy.
Well, let me ask you, if you bought a business, do you think it's possible to completely outsource the ad and growth to somebody else? And would that be too expensive, or you'd have to have some knowledge yourself? Is that accurate to say?
I think it's always best to have like some firsthand knowledge. Like,
Sure.
if somebody's going to buy a business, they need to understand everything in the business, and then sort of outsource it so they really understand that. But it's definitely possible to outsource this stuff. And like, I've even done it on some of my businesses. I'm working with some agencies that they're just very good and very good at what they do, especially in the ad space. And the kind of structure that we have is a base salary plus a percentage of growth.
I see. That's awesome. That's awesome. So definitely, there's so many different ways to make money, and you've proven it. You've done it. How many different ways? You have a blog. What's your blog, Mike? Do you still have it? And do you have a
Yeah,
website?
so the best way to find me is just go to globalcareerbook.com. That has like kind of everything I'm doing. It's got links to my book. It's got links to all the programs that I'm running now, and all the social media platforms that I'm posting content on, and how to get in touch if you are interested in selling your business, buying a business, or doing whatever. I'm pretty responsive to people, to strangers who just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Instagram's probably like the platform. If you send me a DM, you have the highest chance of getting a reply. Um,
Nice.
so you can follow me on Instagram at Mike Swigunski, and you can get all those details at globalcareerbook.com.
That's awesome, Mike. So clearly, you've proven you're able to travel the world, make money, and you've done so many interesting things already. Well, how old are you now, Mike? If you don't mind me asking, I'm just curious how far you've come in such a short period of time.
Yeah, so I'm 33, but I've been
Wow.
doing this for, more than a decade. So it's just uh, every year just trying to grow a little bit more and trying to improve yourself. I think that's kind of like what I've seen. Looking back, it's like it's crazy if you look at year one to now, it's like unbelievable. But
Right.
again, each year is just another step towards what you want to do, and becoming a better version of yourself.
Absolutely. That's awesome, Mike. So such great information. Is there anything that you have goals for in a few? What do you see yourself in 5 years? Still traveling, doing your thing, or what? Where do you see yourself in a few years from now? Do you want to kind of continue doing what you're doing? Do you have bigger goals, loftier goals? I know it's not necessarily about money for you. It seems like the ability
Yeah,
to travel, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, so for me, I want to help impact more people on a larger scale. Like, I've had a lot of success, but I feel like I haven't impacted millions of people or inspired millions of people yet. So I want to just keep growing that. So I've got a lot of plans for how to do that. I've got some big things coming out in the next year, to kind of help go towards that. As far as like, for me, I have like three sort of categories. There's like health, wealth, and relationships. So for each one of those categories, I kind of have certain goals that I work on every year. And as far
Awesome.
as the 5 year goal, for me, it's more like just leaving an everlasting impact. Of course, increasing my income is a good thing, but also increasing my physical and mental health, my relationships with friends, family, both professionally and romantically. So
Yeah.
trying to optimize all areas of my life is kind of my day-to-day goal and kind of my long-term goal, but also helping educate and inspire other people who want to kind of break free of this like alternative path that we've kind of only positioned or kind of only sold this one linear path in America, and I want to be able to present another option that can work for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's great advice, Mike. And you mentioned the one linear path, and it's really funny because when I was reading the book, there was one instance you mentioned in there. You said, people tend to get a career or they go to school for something, then end up going back and starting from square, from square zero. And that happened to me. I actually went back to be I had a degree in history. I was a customer service, all these different things I did. I was really just felt stuck, so I went back to be a physical therapist assistant. Restarted, went to school full time, spent my 401k, trying to re-educate myself, and then it led to this. But you talked about that in the book. You were spot on. It seems like everybody is supposed to go to college and um, get a job, and maybe in 40, 50 years you can retire, right? So
Right.
you've taken a completely different path, and I think that's a great way to go. If you had somebody that was young and didn't, or even if they're older, like myself, and you want to give them advice on where to start. Obviously, your book's a good place, but what would you give them? What advice would you give them, or motivation would you give them if you went back in time and talked to yourself, your early self?
Yeah. So for me, I think it took some time to realize that I was never going to create the type of life that I want without starting my own businesses. Um, you were always going to be, an employee. You're always going to be kind of at the bounds. Like right now, I'm the only one kind of responsible for how much money I make and my working schedule. I can kind of dictate that from what time I want to wake up and what I do in between, and then again who I work with. So like I have full freedom in that capacity. I have full freedom in what location I'm in. So as far as like and then lastly, like the important thing is I get 100% of the ROI is coming back into me. Whereas
Right.
if you're an employee, you're only gonna ever get maybe a 10% raise after a few years. The math just doesn't work out to how you're gonna create and retire early if that is your plan. So what a lot of people can do is right now, if you have a remote job and you're earning a U.S. salary, you can move to a place like the Republic of Georgia, and instead of working for 30 years, you could just save up, invest, and you can retire, probably 20, 25 years earlier because the cost of living is so much lower. So they have a really low cost of living, but an extremely high quality of life. So it's one of the best like equilibriums for that, where your dollar just goes a lot further. So for me, I consider myself semi-retired, and a lot of people are like, "Why don't you move back to the U.S.?" Because if I wanted to replicate this same sort of lifestyle, I'd either have to make like 100 times more money, or just greatly reduce like my lifestyle that I'm used to, and continue working for a lot longer period of time for somebody else probably. So it's the geo arbitrage, the geo arbitrage aspect of living overseas, if done rightly, is extremely valuable because it gives you a longer runway. It lets you be in a position to take more risk to grow your businesses. So I know some people who've moved out to Thailand and they've got 24 months of runway. Like that's a long time. If they were going to live in the U.S. in any state, maybe that runway from 24 months is like 3 or 6 months with the cost of living. So that's why a lot of people are realizing it. And even in the US, people are moving away from California to like Nevada
Yes.
because they can get a lot more for their dollar there. But if you go to international spaces, you get exponentially more for your dollar. So that's kind of one of the big benefits to living overseas.
Makes a ton of sense. So you're taking advantage of cost of living. You're able to move to a different place. You're able to live your dream and travel. But at the same time, your dollar goes a lot further, and you're able to, if you want to even start another business, you can, like you said, survive on a lot less for a lot longer. So that's
Exactly.
great advice, Mike. Um, Is there anything else you wanted to add, Mike? I know you do so many things. It's hard for me to keep track of them all. And I haven't got a chance to talk with you recently, but is there anything else you wanted to add, to anybody out there that might be listening?
Yeah, so I'd say like just get started with something. I think I followed the path of making side hustles, and that's the least risky way to get into it. So just start today. Like I was, to give people a little bit of context, like I was working 50, 60 hours for the startup company, and then I was working another 15, 20 hours on my side projects. And a lot of times for these transformational moments, you have to give up something. So I stopped drinking for 3 years. I stopped going out on the weekends
Nice.
and partying. And I basically just put that focus, like our weekends are 28% of our time. So these people who say, I don't have time to start a business,
Right.
I think that's just not true. Like you haven't prioritized it, or you haven't sacrificed something else, and it's hard to do. It's not easy to kind of make this transformation. But get started on something. You have 10 to 15 hours a week to do something. I guarantee it. Even if it's just uh, giving up something that you enjoy to like start building a better life for you, it'll really work out better in the future, and it'll put people in a position to create a life and mold the life that they're actually loving and passionate about.
That's great advice because absolutely, I say the same thing. People say they don't have the opportunity, they don't have the money. They don't realize the time that we put in. I mean, I was putting in, I was getting 5, 6 hours of sleep. I was working full time, and I put in the time to build it. And they see the good parts now where it's easier when you get the capital, but they didn't see the time before that when you struggled and you worked your butt off.
Yeah,
Like you said, there's a transition period there for sure. I agree, where you have to just push through. It takes a lot of grit, and you have to give up a lot of things. I gave up my weekends, same type of thing. Um, so awesome advice. Thank you so much, Mike, for everything. All the information, globalcareer.net. Is that right?
globalcareerbook.com.
Book.com. Sorry about that. That'll all be in the description, and all the other information. If you want to reach Mike, if you have questions, if you want to talk about anything from traveling all the way to business acquisition, to just anything to do with digital nomad life, and just being an entrepreneur, I'm sure Mike would be able to give you further information on all that stuff. So thank you so much, Mike, for the interview. I really appreciate it. And you have a blessed day, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It was really great chatting with you, and thanks so much for having me on. And again, if for anybody listening, don't hesitate to get in touch. I do reach out and respond to people, and I love helping people. That's why I do these types of interviews, is to hopefully help other people kind of get started on their own journey.
And this really helps me out too, Mike. I appreciate it. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe. Nobody likes and subscribes, right? I need to build my
Yeah, hit the
audience.
like, hit the subscribe, and leave
Yeah,
a comment below. It helps us small YouTubers grinding through this. So
that's right. All right. Thank you so much, Mike. You have a wonderful day, man.
take care, Brian.
All right. You too.
Bye.